My daughter abandoned me at the hospital on Christmas Eve. I was standing in the cold with nothing but a paper bag of medication and a discharge folder when a homeless man named Wesley shared his blanket with me. The next morning, a lawyer in a tailored coat stepped out of a black sedan and asked Wesley a question that made my hands shake. What he said next changed the rest of my life. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end. And please drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. My name is Maurice. I'm 67 years old, and until last Christmas Eve, I thought the worst day of my life had already happened. That was the day, 4 years ago, when I buried my wife Eloise after 38 years of marriage. I was wrong. There were worse days waiting for me. I just hadn't met them yet. I spent my whole working life teaching 10th grade history at Madison High in Asheville, North Carolina. 31 years in the same classroom, the same chalkboard ghosts under 31 coats of paint. After Eloise passed, I kept the house she and I bought back in 1986, but the silence in those rooms got loud in a way I couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't lived through it. So when my daughter Adeline called and said her husband Travis had a finished basement, and they had room for me, and the grandkids were getting older and didn't I want to be close, I said yes. I sold the house in May. I moved up to Charlotte in June. I gave Adeline most of the money from the sale to help with what she called the renovation, even though I never saw a contractor and the basement stayed exactly the way it was. I kept telling myself I was investing in family. 8 months in, I had a heart attack on a Tuesday morning while I was making coffee. I remember the kettle whistling, and I remember thinking the kitchen tile was a lot colder against my cheek than I would have guessed. Adeline drove me to Carolina's Medical. They put 2 stents in. I was in a step-down unit for 5 days. The cardiologist, a young woman who couldn't have been older than 35, sat on the edge of my bed and told me I'd need someone at home for at least 2 weeks. Help getting up. Help managing 12 different pills. Help noticing if my color went bad. Adeline nodded along the whole time. She held my hand for the doctor. She said all the right things. On the afternoon of December 24th, the nurse rolled me down to the discharge entrance in a wheelchair. I had a plastic bag with my pill bottles, a folder of paperwork, and the clothes I'd been wearing when the ambulance came. The nurse, a big man with a beard, parked me under the heater by the automatic doors. He told me my daughter said she was running 10 minutes late. He patted my shoulder, said she was running 10 minutes late. He patted my shoulder. He went back inside. I sat there from 3:20 in the afternoon until 7 o'clock at night. I called Adeline maybe 9 times. The first 4, she didn't pick up. The 5th time, she answered and said traffic was insane, she was almost there, and to stop calling because she was driving. The 7th time, my son-in-law Travis answered her phone, and his voice had that careful, rehearsed quality people use when they've already had the argument with someone else and they're about to lose it on you. He said, "Maurice, listen, we need to talk about this when you get settled somewhere." "Settled where?" I asked. Adeline's been thinking. "With the kids and her work schedule and everything you need right now, we can't be the right setup for you. You know what I mean? There's facilities for this." We made some calls. I remember staring at the automatic doors as they kept opening and closing for other families, wreaths on the walls, a volunteer in a Santa hat pushing a cart of poinsettias toward the elevator. "You're not coming to get me," I said. "We left some of your things on the porch in case you find somewhere by tonight. We changed the lock this afternoon. I'm sorry, Maurice. I know how this sounds." I asked to speak to my daughter. He said she was in the shower. Then he hung up. I'd given that girl $41,000 in May. The nurse with the beard came back out around 7:30, finishing his shift, and saw me still sitting there. He asked, very gently, if there was someone else I could call. I told him I'd figure it out. I didn't want him to see me cry, so I made my face into the face I used to use on rough days at the school, the one that said the bell already rang. "Please go to your next class." He hesitated, and then he wheeled me out to a bench just past the parking deck, because hospital policy said I couldn't stay in the lobby once I was discharged. He gave me his scarf. He told me I'd be okay. I don't think he believed it, but I appreciated him saying it anyway. It started snowing around 8. Charlotte doesn't get real snow usually, but that night it came down in thick, wet flakes that stuck to my eyebrows. I had on a windbreaker. I had $11 in my wallet. My phone was at 22%. I had no idea where in the city I was because Adeline had driven me to the hospital and I'd been half conscious the whole time. Somewhere around 9, a man pushed a grocery cart down the sidewalk past the parking deck. He stopped. He came back. He looked at me sitting there in my windbreaker with my paper bag of medication on my lap, and he didn't say anything for a long moment. "Brother," he said, "you can't stay out here." I looked up at him. He was about my age, maybe a little younger. He had a salt and pepper beard and one of those puffy military surplus coats with the collar half torn. His eyes were clear and steady in a way that surprised me because I'd been bracing for the kind of glassy look I'd taught myself to expect from people sleeping rough. "My daughter was supposed to pick me up," I said. It sounded so stupid I almost laughed. He didn't laugh. He looked at the hospital bracelet still on my wrist. He looked at the pill bag. "How long ago was supposed to?" "About 6 hours." He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he already suspected. He pulled a folded blanket from his cart, a heavy wool army blanket with a stripe down the side, and he draped it over my legs. Then he sat down on the bench next to me. "My name's Wesley," he said. "I'm not going to ask you a bunch of questions, but you stay out here tonight. You're not going to see Christmas morning. I know a spot. It's not much. It's dry. There's a fire barrel. You walk with me. I'll get you somewhere you can sleep." I told him I'd just had a heart attack. I told him I had stents. I told him I wasn't sure I could walk far. He thought about that for a minute. Then he stood up and walked his cart over to the bench, and he stood up and walked his cart over to the bench, and he started unloading things from it. Not unloading like throwing them out. Unloading like making space. "Get in," he said. "In the cart? You weigh what, $170?" I've pushed heavier. I sat in a Harris Teeter shopping cart on Christmas Eve in falling snow, while a homeless man pushed me 5 blocks to an underpass where 4 other men were sitting around a metal drum with a small fire in it. I was crying the whole way, and I didn't try to hide it. Wesley didn't say a word about it. He just kept pushing. The men under the bridge made room. One of them, a younger guy named Tomas, who had the worst cough I've ever heard, gave up his folded cardboard pad without being asked. Wesley introduced me as the professor, which I never corrected, and told them I'd been left at the hospital. Nobody said anything cruel about my daughter. One of them, an older black gentleman everyone called Pop, just shook his head and said, On Christmas. That ain't right. They had a can of beef stew. They shared it. Wesley insisted I take more than my share because of the medication. He read every single one of my pill bottles by the light of the fire, asking me when I'd last taken each one, making me take the ones I'd missed with a bottle of water that Tomas produced from somewhere. He told me to keep the nitroglycerin in my shirt pocket where I could get to it fast. He acted like a man who had done all of this before, and I didn't ask why he knew. Around midnight, the cough I mentioned, Tomas's cough, got bad. Real bad. Wet and ragged. The kid was maybe 35 and he was burning up. I put my hand on his forehead and pulled it back like I'd touched a stove. "He needs a hospital," I told Wesley. "He won't go," Wesley said. "Got a warrant out of Tennessee from 8 years ago. Stupid stuff. Bar fight. He's been ducking it ever since." I had a thought. It came out of nowhere, but it came hard. I sat up on my cardboard and I said, "Tell him the warrant doesn't matter. Tell him I'll go in with him and I'll sit with him until they figure it out. Hospitals in this state, the emergency room can't run his name like that. It's not their job. He'll be fine." Wesley looked at me for a long second. Then he went and talked to Tomas. 20 minutes later, the 4 of us, Wesley pushing my cart, Pop holding Tomas up, walked back to the emergency room I'd been discharged from 6 hours earlier. The triage nurse took one look at Tomas's chest x-ray and put him on a gurney. Pneumonia, both lungs. They told us another night outside would have killed him. I sat in that waiting room with Wesley until almost 4 in the morning. We didn't talk much. He bought us 2 cups of bad hospital coffee from the vending machine with quarters he counted out of a sock. At one point, he said very quietly, "Why'd you do that? For somebody you don't know." I said, "Because somebody should have done it for me tonight." He looked at the floor. He didn't say anything else for a long time. We walked back to the underpass just before dawn. I was wrecked. My chest was tight in a way that scared me. Wesley made me sit by the fire and he covered me with the wool blanket and another one he produced from a duffel bag. And he sat across from me and watched me sleep, which I only know because every time I half opened my eyes, he was sitting there, his face lit orange by the flame. I dreamed about Eloise. She was making pancakes in the kitchen of the house I'd sold. She turned around and smiled at me and said, "About time you woke up, Maurice." And then she pointed past my shoulder, like there was something behind me I needed to see. I woke up to the sound of a car door closing. It was just after 7 in the morning. The sky was that pale gray that means snow has stopped and the sun is thinking about trying. There was a black Lincoln Town car idling about 40 feet from the underpass. A man in a long charcoal overcoat was walking toward us, careful of the slush, carrying a leather portfolio. He was maybe 50, with thinning blonde hair, and he had the bearing of somebody who knew exactly which one of us he was looking for. Pop saw him first and stiffened. 5-0. No, Wesley said very quietly. It's all right, Pop. The man stopped a respectful distance from the fire. He nodded at Wesley. Sir, he said, 2 days, as agreed. Wesley took a long breath. His shoulders dropped about an inch. Then he looked at me and there was something almost apologetic in his face. Maurice, he said, I need to tell you something, and I'd like you to hear me out before you get mad. I sat up under the blanket. My chest hurt. My head hurt. I had no idea what was happening. Okay. My name's Wesley Aldridge, he said. I'm 64 years old. I founded a company called Aldridge Carolina in 1981. Commercial real estate, mostly retail centers, a few medical office parks. I sold a majority interest in 2019 for a number I'd rather not say out loud in front of friends. He gestured at Pop and the others, who were all staring at him now. I'm not homeless, Maurice. Not the way you mean. The last 6 months, I've been out here for a reason. The man in the coat is my attorney. He brings me food, medication if I need it, and a phone twice a week. I check in. That's the deal. I just looked at him. He kept going. He talked to the fire more than he talked to me. 2 years ago, my son did something to me. The kind of thing you can't unsee even if you try. He's a smart kid. Stanford MBA. He got a power of attorney signed by my second wife when I was recovering from a knee replacement, and I was on enough painkillers to drop a horse. He used it to move some assets around. Long story. By the time I figured it out, the assets were gone, and so was he, and so was she. I got most of it back eventually. The lawyer here, Brennan, he's the reason. The man in the overcoat dipped his head slightly. He didn't smile. After that mess settled, Wesley said, I sat in a house with 13 rooms and nobody in it but a woman who cleaned it twice a week, and I thought, I don't know a single person in my life who would help me if they didn't think there was something in it for them. Not one. My friends are business friends. My family is what you saw. I had a granddaughter I hadn't met. I had a niece I hadn't called in 11 years. I had been alive for 64 years and I couldn't name 3 people who knew me. He paused. So I made a deal with Brennan and I came out here to see who people are when they don't know who you are. He finally looked up at me. I've been out here 183 days, Maurice. I've slept in shelters and under bridges and in 2 abandoned buildings. I've met a lot of people, some good ones. He looked at Pop, who was just watching, expressionless. Pop's a good one. Tomas is a good one underneath all of it. But mostly what I've seen is people walking past. People crossing the street so they don't have to see us. People being afraid of us. His voice got rough. Last night you sat in a Harris teeter cart in the snow because you trusted me. And then, 3 hours later, with stents in your chest, you walked back to that hospital for a man you'd known for 90 minutes because you said somebody should have done it for you. I didn't know what to say. I really didn't. Brennan stepped forward. He cleared his throat in a polite, professional way. Mr. Aldridge has asked me to come a day earlier than scheduled. He'd like to extend you an invitation, mister. He paused, looking at me. Maurice Crowder. Mr. Crowder. Breath Crowder to recuperate at his home in Lake Norman while you finish your recovery. He's also asked me to inform you that, regardless of your answer, your hospital bill is being settled, and any prescription costs going forward will be handled. He'd like to make that part separate from anything else, so you don't feel obligated. I sat there in a homeless man's wool blanket, and I started to laugh. I couldn't help it. It was the kind of laugh that's mostly just trying not to be a sob. Pop reached over and squeezed my knee through the blanket and said, Brother, you should go. Don't be a fool twice in one day. I looked at Wesley. He looked back at me. There was no satisfaction in his face. He looked tired and a little ashamed, and underneath that, hopeful in a careful way. What about them? I said, nodding at Pop, at the other 2 men, at the empty space where Tomas had been before the ambulance. Wesley nodded slowly. That's the right question to ask, Maurice. We'll talk about that too. I went with him. I want to tell you about the next year, because the next year is the part that mattered most. The house at Lake Norman was big. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. 6 bedrooms, a dock, a view across the water that made me cry the first morning I saw it. Partly because of how beautiful it was, and partly because I kept thinking, Eloise would have loved this. But the house wasn't the point. The point was Wesley's niece, a woman named Teresa, who showed up the second day I was there with 3 kids in the back of a minivan because Wesley had called her and said, I want you to meet someone. Teresa was 42, divorced, raising her 3 on her own and adjunct to teaching nursing at a community college outside Mooresville. She walked in with her arms full of grocery bags because that's the kind of woman she is. And she looked at me, this stranger in her uncle's kitchen, and she said, You must be the professor. I said, I'm not actually a professor. She said, Around here you are now. Her kids were a boy of 12 named Asa, a girl of 9 named Junie, and a 4-year-old boy named Hollis, who walked over to me on the second day, climbed up on the couch next to me without saying a word, and fell asleep against my arm. I sat there for an hour and a half not moving because I didn't want to wake him up. We didn't rush anything. Wesley and I drank coffee on the dock every morning, and we talked. He told me about his son, whose name I won't say here, and about the way he still loved him even though he couldn't ever trust him again. I told him about Adeline, about the $41,000, about the basement that never got finished, about Eloise, about all of it. He listened the way Eloise used to listen, which is to say he didn't try to fix any of it. He just sat with me. In February, Wesley bought a piece of land off Statesville Road, an old church camp that had been shuttered for a decade. 12 cabins, a dining hall, a creek. He called it the Aldridge House Project, and he made me a co-director. Our job was simple. Long-term housing for older men coming out of homelessness, 6 months to 2 years, with case management, healthcare coordination, and a job placement partnership with 2 of his old commercial tenants. Pop was our 3rd resident. Tomas, after he got out of the hospital, and after Brennan very quietly made some calls to Tennessee, was our 5th. I had an office above the dining hall with a window that looked out over the creek. I made $64,000 a year, which was $22,000 more than my last teaching salary, and I gave half of it back to the project every quarter. Wesley pretended to be annoyed by that. He wasn't. Teresa and the kids started spending weekends at the lake house, then weekends and Wednesdays. By June, Hollis was calling me Granddad without anybody having a conversation about it. Junie asked one night at dinner if it was weird that she had 4 grandfathers now, counting her real ones, and Wesley and me, and Teresa said, Sweetheart, you can have as many as love you. That's how it works. And Asa, who was 12 and pretending not to listen, said quietly, Cool. I want to be honest with you. Adeline contacted me in August. I was in my office at the Aldridge house. Brennan had set up an email address for me because the project needed one, and somehow she got it, probably from an old colleague at Madison High. The email said, Dad, I heard from Cousin Mike that you're in some kind of program up in Iredell County. I don't know who you're with or what they've told you about us. I'm sure it's been hard. Travis and I have been going through it. We had to refinance, and we're behind on a lot. I think we both said things we regret. I would like to come see you. The kids miss you. The kids miss you. Whatever you have going on, we are still your family. I read it 3 times. I went and stood on the dock for about an hour. Then I came back and I wrote her a reply. And I want to read it to you, because I think it's the most honest thing I've ever written. Adeline, I got your email. I'm glad you and the kids are okay. I am alive because a homeless man named Wesley put a blanket on my legs on Christmas Eve and pushed me 5 blocks in a grocery cart while it snowed. He did that for me because he didn't know me. You did what you did to me because you did know me. I have thought about this every day for 8 months. I don't have any anger left, but I don't have anything else for you either. Not right now. I am not coming back. I don't need anything from you, and I am not going to give anything more. The kids can write to me when they're older if they want to. I'll write back. I will always write back to them. Tell Travis I hope his business turns around. I mean that. Love still, somehow, but from a long way away. Dad. She wrote back the same day. The email was 4 paragraphs long, and most of it was about how unfair I was being. I didn't reply. I haven't replied since. 2 months later, in October, Brennan came to the Aldrich house on a Wednesday with a folder, and Wesley walked in behind him, grinning like a man holding a secret he couldn't carry anymore. "What?" I said. "Sit down, Maurice. I don't like when you say that." He laughed. Brennan laid the folder on my desk. "Teresa and the kids and I have been talking," Wesley said. "And there's a thing called adult adoption in North Carolina. It's clean, it's legal, and what it does is it makes you my brother. Officially. On paper. Estate-wise. Family-wise. Everything-wise. 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 Teresa would be your niece, legally. The kids would be your great-niece and great-nephews, legally. But they're already going to call you Granddad because Hollis told them they have to." I looked at the folder. I didn't open it. "Why?" I said. He sat down on the other side of my desk, which is something he almost never did. Usually he stood or paced. "Because I never had a brother," he said, "and neither did you. And I'm going to be 65 in March, and I want the people I love to be the people on my paperwork. And I want you to know, in a way, you can hand to a clerk at the DMV, that you are not somebody I rescued. You are somebody I owe." I cried in front of him for the second time. The first time was Christmas morning under the bridge. We did the paperwork in November. Teresa baked a cake. Pop came and gave a speech that started out funny and ended with him telling me that the day I sat in that shopping cart was the day God answered a prayer he didn't even know he'd been praying. Asa had made me a card. Junie had made me a card. Junie had made me a card. Alice had drawn what was either a giraffe or a self-portrait, possibly both, on the back of a Bojangles receipt. It's December again now. Almost a year exactly. I'm sitting at the kitchen table at the lake house. Teresa is out back with the kids, and Wesley, who is teaching Hollis how to bait a hook with what I can only describe as a level of patience I have never seen in another human being. There is a turkey in the oven. The dining hall up at the Aldrich house is doing its own Christmas dinner today for 41 men and the staff and the volunteers, and we'll drive up tomorrow to deliver pies. Pop is going to be there. Tomas just got his commercial driver's license last month, and his sister flew in from El Paso to see him for the holidays. I don't know how to describe that moment to you when he introduced her to me as my brother Maurice. I don't have the words. I just know I had to walk outside. If you'd told me 14 months ago, sitting on that bench outside Carolina's Medical with a paper bag of pills and $11 in my wallet, that I'd be here, I wouldn't have laughed at you. I wouldn't have had the strength to laugh. I would have just looked at you and asked you, very tiredly, to please leave me alone. I learned something out there in the snow. I want to share it with you, and then I'll let you go. I learned that family is the people who show up when nothing's in it for them. That's it. That's the whole thing. The people who hold your hand for the cardiologist, that's a performance. The people who sit on a bench next to you at 9 o'clock at night and put a blanket on your legs, that's family. Sometimes those are the same people. Sometimes, God help us, they aren't. I want to know about you. Has anyone ever shown up for you when they had no reason to? Has anyone ever walked past you when you needed them most? Tell me your city. Tell me your story. I read every comment, and I write back to as many as I can. There are 2 more stories on the end screen that I think you'll feel in your chest the same way you might be feeling this one. Go watch them if you have a little more time tonight. And whoever you are, wherever you are watching from, please be the person who stops. You don't know what your blanket is worth to somebody on a bench. Thank you for staying with me. Merry Christmas, friend. Drive home safe. I sat on the dock at Lake Norman the morning after the adoption paperwork went through, and I thought about cause and effect in a way I hadn't thought about it since I was teaching 10th grade history. Every choice has a wake behind it, like a boat moving across water. You can't always see the wake while you're making the choice. You only see it later when you turn around. My daughter Adeline made her choice on a December afternoon. She chose convenience over a father. She chose a finished kitchen over a man who taught her to ride a bicycle. The wake behind that choice is still spreading. Her business is gone. Her marriage, from what little I hear, is in pieces. I don't say this with any pleasure. I say it because it's the truth about how the world actually works. When you treat the people who love you like furniture you can move to the curb, you slowly become someone nobody wants to keep. That's not a curse. That's just arithmetic. Wesley made a different choice. He chose to sit down on a cold bench next to a stranger and put a blanket on his legs. He had no idea who I was. He had no reason to believe I would ever be useful to him. And the wake behind that choice carried me, and his niece Teresa, and 3 kids, and Pop, and Thomas, and 41 men up at the Aldrich house, into a life none of us could have built alone. I want to tell you what I learned, plainly, because I'm 67 years old and I'm done dressing things up. Goodness isn't a feeling. It's a series of small, inconvenient decisions you make when nobody's watching and nothing is in it for you. You build a good life the same way you build a stone wall, one stubborn rock at a time, in weather you didn't ask for. That's the discipline of it. That's the work. Wisdom isn't about being clever. It's about knowing the difference between people who say loving things and people who do loving things. Adeline said all the right things in that hospital room. Wesley said almost nothing the first night under that bridge. One of them held my hand for the doctor. The other one walked back into an emergency room with me at 3 a.m. for a man neither of us knew. Pay attention to who walks. Words are cheap. Snow is real. And strength, I think, is the smallest of these 3, but it's the one that holds the other 2 up. I had to find the strength to write that email to my daughter and mean every line of it. I had to find the strength to not write back when she called me unfair. Forgiveness doesn't mean you go back. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is wish someone well from a long way away and keep walking toward the people who actually showed up. If you take anything from my story tonight, take this. Be the person who stops. Be the person who carries the blanket. The wake of that one decision will outlive you in ways you'll never measure.